Okay, so now we're going to start working on getting the hydraulic top cover repaired, blasted and painted. These things are extremely heavy, and it's mainly because of two things. One is that cast iron cylinder, which is your lift cylinder, and then right in that area there's a big shaft called the rock shaft. Once you get those two components out, these things are pretty manageable. But up to that point, they're pretty heavy, so if you lift them up, be careful, don't hurt yourself. Possibly get somebody to help you if you need to. But with that being said, the first thing I'm going to do is get that cylinder off. And the first thing I got to do to get that cylinder off is I got to take off the hydraulic takeoff plate on the top. So I'm going to spin the camera around and get it pointed at that, and then we'll get that taken off first, and then we'll get that cylinder off. So this is the top plate on your hydraulic top cover. If you have a remote hydraulic, this is where it's going to be located. Now to get that cylinder off, we have 4 bolts. Well, as you see, there's only 3 here. The 4th one's underneath here. So that's why this cover has to come off first. These 2 bolts you took out when you took the hydraulic top off. This bolt here I have loose because I used this one and the rear seat bolt to hook a chain to take this off the tractor. And I'm pretty sure I did that in teardown video number 5. So this bolt is already loose. This bolt is finger tight, if that, because I mean it's nothing. This bolt I shouldn't have to mess with, and then you got this little guy right here. And you'll see it here in a second, but I can already see it. Somebody siliconed this back on with what looks to be like clear caulk sealer like you'd use in your house. Yeah, this is just sealed with O-rings. Do not put silicone on this, because that will squeeze out and get all in your valves and everything, and will wreak havoc. So just don't do it. So I got a rag down here to try to catch some oil, because oil will come out. Hopefully mine won't be too much since it's been setting for nearly a year now. But go ahead and get them 2 bolts out, and then we'll take that little guy there out. So now this cover should pop off. Okay. And like I said, you can see the silicone here. But you should have, I think it's 7 O-rings, 8, maybe 8 O-rings here. Yes. There's 8 O-rings. So you got 2, 4, 6, 8 O-rings on this cover. I got a little bit of oil in mine. I'm just going to set it over here out of the way for now. So there's our 4th bolt for our lift cylinder. This is one of our valves. There's, I think, 4 valves total. You have your relief valve, a safety valve, a check valve, and a back pressure valve. I believe this one is the safety. The pressure relief valve is in the bottom of the center housing. The other 2 valves are kind of right in here. And these will be removed before we sandblast in anything, because we don't want sand in them. There's some more of that silicone. I don't know why you would do that whenever you can just get O-rings pretty much anywhere for these things. So now I'm going to go ahead and get these broke free. I'm going to take this cover or this top plate and just kind of lay it down. See if I can maybe get my bolts loose this way. Okay, now I got them loose. Let me set it back up. Oh! Whew! That was close. Well, at least that port's not clogged. Yeah, beware of that. When I set this down, you know, these lift arms moved. So when I set it back up, I had to push them back down to keep this thing, you know, in an upright position. And when I did that, it shot hydraulic fluid everywhere. Thankfully, it barely missed my camera. It went to the side of it. Still got a little bit on it, but it basically missed it. So I got lucky on that accord. Alright. So now that I have these bolts loose, we'll go ahead and get them taken out. That bolt right there is longer than these two. Now be aware when you take this off, this last bolt, you're going to end up losing a lot of weight on the bottom of this thing, and it might have the tendency to want to roll. Now if you caught that, mine started to lean forward when I was holding on to it so it wouldn't go. But now you see if I let go, it doesn't want to roll forward. So now back here on the rear, there's a cotter pin and a split pin right here. Take these guys loose. I'm trying to do this in a hurry because my battery's about dead. Cotter pin out and the clevis pin. Little plunger will pop out. Now the cylinder's loose. And like I say, now this thing's going to want to fall because you're now missing all of this weight. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to turn mine this way. That way I can kind of lean it backwards onto my workbench. Okay. So now it's time to go a little deeper. So the next thing we want to take off is going to be our quadrant assembly, touch control. You know, it's called different things. First thing I'm going to do is actually take off the actual touch lever. That's going to be these two nuts, or two bolts down here. Just gotta lift that up to get that guy off of there, because it's in a groove. It should just pop right out, but you got a piece of steel versus aluminum, so you're gonna have some kind of corrosion and stuff. Now, of course, mine don't want to cooperate. Seems to be about most things on this tractor. Nothing wants to cooperate. But there's that piece, and It's bent pretty good. Might try and straighten it. We might replace it. We'll see. Things like compound twisted too. So now we can take off a little quadrant lever here. Okay, so I put that lever back on there just to kind of give you something to help hold it, to break this free. So there's a nut there, and then there's this little spring and a washer. Now this spring, I'm pretty sure is available. Of course, nut and washer's a nut and a washer. Nothing fancy there. And take this touch control back off. Okay, so this piece should slide off of here now. And I say should because, you know, in theory it's supposed to. However, being 60 years old, you know, with rust, corrosion from aluminum and steel, it might come off, it might not. These are available. They're aluminum. They are available. They should be the same from the 8N on up. So if you break it, it's not, you know, that big of an issue. Of course, try not to break it, but if you do, you know, it's no big deal. So there is a cork friction disc back here behind it, in between the aluminum and the actual quadrant. So you can kind of get in there and kind of hit against it and everything and try to knock it free. I think I might take a torch and heat mine up a little bit to see if I can break some of that free. Okay, so heat got that off. Of course, I'm not going to grab it because that thing's not extremely hot to the point of I was actually blistering the paint. So you can see where I kind of had to knock around the edge to get it out, and so I'll smooth some of that out. But as you see, here's our little cork disc, or what's left of it. These are available, so don't worry about them. There's a key right here, a Woodruff key. We got to get that key out to get this quadrant off and to get that rod out. Usually you can take a hammer, tap on like one side of them, and they'll roll up and out. And then just take like a punch or screwdriver, drive it on that side to roll it up and out of the groove. And then you can grab it with a pair of pliers, lift it up and out. This shaft is now free, it just runs all the way in. I'm going to go ahead and take this quadrant off. And that's just these 4 bolts right here on the side. Just tap that clear of the shaft. So there's a quadrant off. There's a gasket here. Okay, so now that I have the quadrant off, the top will kind of lay flat now. Oh, I got too much crap on my workbench. But now you can kind of see in here a little bit better. This big dog bone, I got it kind of wedged right now because of the way my lift is sitting here, near my top. But down here, we'll see a cotter pin and a nut. That is holding our quadrant shaft and all this mechanism together. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned in this video, although I did whenever I tore it apart, back here at the rear, which is like at the top of the screen right now, my draft control is super loose. You can see how much this is moving. It should not do that. This draft control spring, this large one that's out here on the outside of the tractor, is actually broken and allowing all this to be sloppy, which might be why the lift on this tractor did not work. But on this main draft spring, these are row crop specific. The 8N and the 100 series I think all use the same, but the row crop is different. Alright, so for starters, let's go ahead and actually tilt this up a little bit. You can see this draft spring is super loose back here. I'm going to go ahead and take that off first. Now, these can be a pain because they're threaded on the outside of the tractor and it might be corroded. But it's simple, just unspin them. This yoke I do not think is row crop specific. However, they are specific to the 100 series. There's some of them that are shorter, like I think the 8N is shorter. So these are specific to the hundreds. I don't know about the later thousands. But that just unscrews. Thankfully mine came off nice and easily. And then we're going to take off the main draft spring. You can see mine's broken right there. And this spring, which it's hard to tell it by itself, but if I had a 800 spring sitting here, you could really tell that this is a lot smaller diameter on the coil and I think overall. So this is actually junk. Next piece out is the little spring seat. I think these can be purchased new, I think. There's a little felt washer here. This one is damaged from, I guess, where this was beating and banging on it for so long. So this will be replaced. So that's kind of all I'm going to do with the back right this second. There is a plate back here. Well, there's technically two plates, but I'm going to leave them for a second, because I want to come back up here and focus on this. On this linkage, I would try to take it out as one piece. And I say that because this little nut right here, I took this loose on the 861 and I reused the nut and it came off. And when this came off, it allowed this thing basically to fully rise. And I had a disc harrow on it at the time, which is thankfully the heaviest thing that we have. And we had to cut the tractor off basically out in the field and just let it sit there until the lift dropped to where I could take the disc off and go get our other tractor to pick the disc up. So I'm going to try and not mess with this guy and just leave it alone. However, this one down here has to come off to get this rod out. Once that's out, this whole linkage here should come out as a unit, and then the only thing left then will be the position linkage, because this is all the draft linkage here. So bend there, get this cotter pin loose. And we'll spin the nut off. It's a nut in the washer. So this is now loose here. The only issue is your back spring will not come out with the rock shaft in because of the way it's designed. And unfortunately I can't get this one out right now either. So now we got to get the rock shaft and lift arms off. So to get these lift arms off, you're going to have 1 or 2 bolts. And that just depends on what model tractor you have. You're going to take this bolt out, and then you're going to pull the big washer off. I'm going to go ahead and just take off both sides. Which I did kind of lie to you there a second ago about the linkage. Technically there is a cotter pin and clevis pin back here at the rear that you can take out and actually disassemble this without taking the shaft out. Which I can go ahead and tell you, these lift arms can be a nightmare to get them on and off. So if you're lucky, they slide right off. If not, you got to heat them up. So it may benefit you to go ahead and try to get this out if these will not cooperate. The problem with that cotter pin is it's kind of buried in there. So it's very difficult to reach. You got to just hold everything right. I might see if I can get mine out just to show you that it can be done. Not to mention it'll make it easier to clean it up, but I can always disassemble it outside for cleanup. Go ahead and take these bolts off the rear to give me some more room to work. Okay, on the rear I said there was 2 plates. These things are available with and without this pin. Make sure you get the one that's correct for yours. That's 1 plate. And then you have this little cover plate. Pretty much always just go ahead and change this one because these get bent over time from the draft control. This one here looks like mine is damaged right there. That should be just circular and not have a little tang sticking on it. So I'll have to replace both of those. Now I can wiggle my draft control in here. Take out this clevis pin here. Pull the draft yoke out of the rear. Thing looks fine. It's not bent, broken. So that just gets cleaned up. But now this linkage here should be able to come up and out. Like so. which now means that the only linkage left is your position. To get the position off, here on our position and draft selector, another cotter pin. Let's take it loose, and then there's a washer behind it. Just take both of those off, and that linkage will come out. And notice that it has the Quadrant arm on it. So you can slide this washer off and then slide this off and get everything cleaned up. Now, you'll hear a lot of talk about a cam follower pin and how you should replace it anytime you have this thing apart. That is this pin right here. Back here on the lift rocker is a cam, and this pin runs on that cam, which this one has some wear on it, but there's no way that's original. But I'm still replacing this because this needs to be accurate and correct before you just set all of your adjustments. So be sure you get a cam follower pin and put one in when you do it. And I will show you how I go about doing that when I get to that point. These things, they're either going to love you or they're going to hate you. If you're lucky, which if they are, I'd suggest you go beat a lottery ticket, these things will slide right off. But more than likely, you're going to have to heat these up to get these off. There is a master spline, if you want to call it that, here, so there's no need to mark these. They only go on one way. The part numbers are on the bottom. I'm going to spin this over here and hang it off the side of the bench. That way I can get the weight off of it. This one. And we'll see how much it wants to fight me. Okay, maybe I need to take my advice and go buy a lottery ticket. I literally turned it off the side of the bench and it started to fall off. So, that's pretty amazing, believe it or not. So there's my rocker arm, or lift arm. These, I'm going to change. The pin's locked up, so I'm probably going to have to heat these up, knock that pin out. Probably won't really video that, but I would change them. These little knuckles, you can get them, and they got pretty good wear. They don't really affect the way the tractor works or anything, but if you're kind of fixing everything up, just go ahead and change them and tighten them back up, you know. Okay, now my next question is, can I go 2 for 2 on these? That is a miracle. Both of them literally just slid right off. I don't know if it's because these things are oily as heck and somebody's had them off before or not, but wow. To get this shaft out, there are 2 giant bushings here and here, because this piece here is locked in there with those 2 bushings. I swear this thing's making me a liar. I ain't never had one come apart this easily. Anyway, grab the shaft. There's one bushing. It just slid right out. So my other bushing slid right out. Whoa, hello. For the love of God, do not drop this shaft. It is heavy. So then pull out your rock shaft. Now this rock shaft is what lifts your implements. So it's pretty beefy. So be aware of that. And then your rocker will lift up and out. Now, you can take this pin here out and get the dog bone out and grease it up. I probably won't. I'll probably just clean mine up really well and grease it down in there and leave it. The rocker also has master spline, so there again, you can't screw it up. There's pretty much 2 pieces, well, I guess technically 3, left in our housing. Those 3 pieces are your position and draft control, and then down here we have this plug. Behind this plug is those 2 valves I told you about. So the easiest thing to get out right now is going to be the draft. So there's a pin here. We'll just drive the pin out, and that'll get the lever off. Little plug right there is a detent. Hear a little spring tick. So before we pull the shaft, we're going to have to take this off, pull the spring and the detent out. But now this is just a casting. They don't weigh anything now. That's what I say. It's a pain in the butt when it's all together, but once you get it apart, it's pretty manageable. It's just getting to this point. So let me grab a punch, and I'll get this roll pin out, and then we'll get the detent out, and then get that little spring, that little lever out. And there should be an O-ring on that, so be sure you change that. Okay, we got a 5/32 punch. Drive the pin out. There's our lever and a little washer behind it. So now let's flip this thing over. Now let's see if we can get this detent cap broke free. Alright, well mine's wanting the chamfer out, so okay, so it's not going to cooperate. I might try to get it out later with an impact driver or something. Maybe my oxyacetylene torch, I can't get it out right now because it's raining. But anyway, there's a plug, spring, and a detent, and then this little shaft that the selector's on. It needs to come out, has an O-ring on it, and get it swapped. But to get these valves out, first thing you got to do is take this cover off. So you got to pull the cover. Ooh, why is that rusted? That should not be rusted. Alright, so now that the plug is out, we're going to look in here and we'll see a valve. This valve you can get out with just a pair of pliers and just pulling on it. Just be gentle, kind of wiggle it, but it should come out. It has an O-ring on it. And this is part of our check valve assembly. Next we have a spring and a plunger. And then we have a detent ball. I have a piece of metal stuck to mine, so that's not good. Need to figure out where that's from. Okay, so the next thing to come out is like a spool valve. To get that valve out, if you look down in there, it's threaded. And you're going to need a 3/8 24 bolt that's about 3 inches long. But you're going to need that 3/8 24 bolt to go in here, grab that valve, and you're going to need washers and eventually probably a socket and whatnot. And you're going to press against this face to pull that valve out. Okay, I found me a bolt to pull this valve out. Well, technically it's a stud. But I have a 3/8 24 stud with a stack of washers on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stud first. And I'm going to stick it in here and thread it into the valve. And bottom it out into the valve. Then I'm going to take a socket, which is a 3/8 drive socket, and this is a 7/8 inch socket. So it'll go there and it'll go over that boss on the top cover. And I'm going to take all these washers and stack them on there. And the washers are going to serve two purposes. Number one, it's going to give it something to kind of spin on. And two, just to give me a little bit further pull with this nut. Because that stud is not fully threaded and it's eventually going to run out of thread. And now that I got that on there, I'm basically just going to start tightening in the nut. And as I tighten this nut, the stud's going to pull out, and it's going to pull the valve out with it. And you can look into these two holes right here on the top cover, and you'll see the valve actually going out. And it should come out fairly easily. This is a bit of a workout though. Okay, now see now right there, it started to pull, or actually spin the stud, which means I'm probably bottomed out onto my stud. And you don't want to spin the stud. You spin the stud, you're going to start stripping out your valve. And then you're pretty much screwed. So you can see here where I bottomed out that stud. So to counteract that, you either have to add more washers or possibly switch to a deeper socket. It kind of just depends on what'll work. Which of course if you have a fully threaded rod, then you ain't gonna have to worry about it anyway. Which I think I can put a deep well socket on mine. I had to get a smaller diameter socket, so I took a washer and just stuck it on there just to give the socket something a little bit better to grab and press against. So we're going to put a couple washers here on the end of the socket. Put the nut back on. And start tightening it down again. Okay, so now I have the valve flush up here. However, it's still in there. So now I have to switch to a bigger socket so this valve will actually go up into the socket. Okay, so now I've switched to an even larger socket. By now you should be able to have a feel for this, of how it feels if you're actually pulling the valve or if it's binding up, because it should come out fairly easily. Okay, and so there's our valve out. There's our valve. And so you can see there where it threads in. There is a little O-ring right there, so we'll be sure to change that when we go back. Let's use a magnet. Reach in there and you'll pull out this little guy. And it comes out this way towards the spool valve. And we have another spring. Now on this spring here, that spring is a smaller diameter and wire size than the one towards the front. If you do look down in here, there looks like there's another piece of a valve. However, there is no way to remove it. Okay, but that's pretty much it. So now the only thing left for me to do is I got to get this fill plug off, because I'm replacing it since it should not have this secondary screw here. I guess somebody kept putting air into it to make it work, which is not how you properly fix these things. So this will be removed and discarded and replaced. And then I got to try to get this little guy for our draft and position out so that I can change the O-ring on it. And then this piece will be cleaned up, sandblasted, cleaned again, primed and painted, and then it'll be time to start putting everything back together.